everyone. My name is Jose Navarrete. I'm in group 41 and I'll be going over module 3. There are quite a few ideas covered in this module, mostly surrounding invention, its patterns, inventors themselves, where these inventions are being created, and how social context comes into play. In the early 19th century, innovation was led by independent inventors. Although there were many, some of the most popular were Nikola Tesla, Thomas Edison, and Orville and Wilbur Wright. A lot of these inventors often came from humble backgrounds with little to no formal education. The debate between scientific theory and practical application has always surrounded engineering, but the latter seems to encompass the majority of inventors during this period. Because this was the case, scientific investigation almost always seemed to follow invention. The why was often discovered after the fact. This is actually contrary to prevalent linear model, the linear model, which places a large emphasis on scientific research first, which then leads to invention down the line. Another idea that is contrary to popular belief is that independent inventors worked in solidarity, when in reality, they had pretty large teams helping them. They tended to work on what was referred to as radical technologies because they often created new industries and destroyed others. They often carried out their work in workshops that they designed and equipped themselves. In the case of Edison and some of the more successful engineers, they worked in these shops until they outgrew them. Edison's famous Menlo Park workshop is where he spent most of his time inventing with his team. By the early 20th century, large research laboratories became dominant and employed a large majority of American engineers. By 1925, 75% of the engineers were employed by the government and corporations. By 1960, 75% of engineers were employed by 1% of the American firms. Only 5% were self-employed. Industrial research labs were able to hire large numbers of people, thus creating environments that fostered teams versus individuals. Acknowledgement was nowhere near the level it had been for the independent inventor in the late 19th century. These labs focused on conservative technologies that mostly improved upon existing technologies. Their focus was profit, not creating new industries, which came with risk. Although many engineers and inventors were employed by industrial labs and government, many were also excluded. Women and African Americans were subject to this. In both the 19th and 20th centuries, when corporations and research labs became prominent, issues of racial and gender discrimination prevented them from employment. As independent inventors, they experienced much more difficulty in attaining the resources required for invention. Despite these difficulties, there are examples of inventors that were able to overcome them. Heidi Lamar, Jan Messlinger, and Sarah Breedlove were some examples. Sarah Breedlove was the first African American woman to become a millionaire with her hair care products. Heidi Lamar worked on technology for torpedoes that later led to technology such as Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, and Jan Messlinger